Good morning, class. And today, what we are going to talk about is uh, money, introduction to money and monetary economics. Okay, so uh, when we actually start with it, these are the topics that is covered: nature and functions of money, introduction to CIA or cash in advance, and MI, MIU functions or money in the utility functions. So, what is money? That's the first thing. So money is any object that is generally used for payment of goods and services, and also for repaying any debts in a given country or from the socio-economic perspective. Okay, it's used for payment of goods, services, or when you have to repay your debts. Now, what is legal tender? It's that money which cannot be refused as payment for goods and services, or for when you pay off the debts, you have to accept it. So it comprises of all the currency and the coins. What is money stock? The amount of money that is available in an economy at a particular point of time. Stock. It's stagnant. Okay, it's not dynamic. It's static. Stock is static. At one particular point of time, the total amount of money in an economy, that is money stock. What is money supply? The total amount of money in circulation. It's within a time, within a given time span. Circulation among the public. That is called money supply. Stock doesn't mean only in the hands of people, but also with the financial institutions, which is their stock. And the money which is in circulation, which is moving, well, it's moving from one person to another, changing hands. That's in circulation. That's what is money supply. Total stock of money which is in circulation. We are not talking about of the reserves. We are not talking of the deposits. We're talking of the liquid assets. So the different measures of money supply that we have is M0, M1, M2, M3, M4. M0 is currency in circulation plus the bankers' deposits with RBI, that's a Reserve Bank, plus other deposits of the Reserve Bank. M1 talks of the currency with the public plus demand deposits with the banking system. It could be current account, savings account, plus other deposits with the Reserve Bank. M2 is M1, everything in M1 plus the savings deposit of the post office. M3 is M1 plus time deposits with the banking system. And M4 is M3 plus all other deposits with the post office savings funds. Post office, it could be now the recurring, it could be the NSC or the time deposit or MIS, whatever, the different ways. Now, M0, as we say, that's the reserve money. Reserve money, why? Because this is the amount of money that has to be there with an economy, reserved, kept in reserve, right, with the central bank. It's also called the high-powered money or monetary base or base money. Monetary base, this is the base. This is what is needed, the basic thing. And this is high-powered in the sense because it has to be there. These things have to be there. And what is it? M0 comprises of the currency in circulation, which is there, plus all the bankers' deposits with the Reserve Bank, plus the other deposits that we have with the Reserve Bank. Okay. Now, next category of money supply is narrow money. Narrow money is a type of money supply which includes all the physical money, that is coins and currency, all the demand deposits and other sort of liquid assets which is held by the central bank. Okay, so this is narrow. It's a narrow definition of money. It's a narrow. It's you include certain specific things. All the physical, like the liquid assets that we have, that is in the currency, coins, right? The demand deposits and any other liquid assets which is held by central bank. So there are two types when we talk of narrow money. M1, which is currency with the public plus demand deposits with the banking system, could be current and savings account plus other deposits with RBI. And M2 is M1 plus the savings deposits of the from the post office. So if you see what are these deposits that we are talking about, it's the current account or savings account, right, where you can actually withdraw. It's you can go and withdraw money like at any point of time. That's why it's more narrow. Now, then with the third category is when we talk of the broad money. Broad money is the third category of money supply, which is measuring the total amount of money circulating in an economy, right? So it gives the total amount of assets that the households and businesses use to make payments, or they can have short-term investments such as currency, funds in bank account, or any other thing that has some value which resembles money. So M3, there are two types. One is M3, which is M1 plus all the time deposits with the banks, and M4 is M3 plus all the deposits with the post office savings banks. That is where we talk of the recurring, the time deposits, the MIS, NSC, where it's not easy to withdraw that money. A part of it is definitely which is in circulation, plus the other, or where circulation plus you have something in savings or savings account or your current account where you can withdraw. The other part, the other type of deposits, it's not so easy to withdraw. It is for a specific time period. That's why it's more complicated. Narrow term money talks of all those assets that we have, which is you can easily use it at any point of time, like not just the cash on hand, but also the you can withdraw from savings or current account. But the other types of deposits that we have, that time deposits or the national savings certificate or the MIS and all the other things, where it's not so easy, it's time bound, these deposits. So when you take everything together, that's broad money. When you take only the liquid assets and the money which is in the savings and the current account, which you can still withdraw, that's narrow money. Okay, so liquidity of these measures, like the different measures that we are talking of, right? How liquidity means how fast you can actually convert it to liquid assets, like on hand, how fast you can convert it to have cash on hand. So liquidity means how fast you can actually convert it into cash in whatever assets you have. Now, when you see the most liquid is M1, which is followed by M2, M3, and M4. M4, it's M1 is most liquid and M4 is least liquid, because you have all these sort of time-bound deposits, which it's not easy to, you cannot, if you encash it, it takes time and you lose interest. So the next thing that comes up is nominal and real value of money. What is nominal money? Is, say for instance, one rupee, one or one neutrum, as we say, it's the value, the one rupee, what was 10 years ago, 1 rupee is still 1 rupee. It's still 1 rupee, right? But that is what it is, like where you actually are talking about it as in their absolute sense, where we are talking in terms of the money itself. It's one, say 1 rupee note or 1 neutron note is one, the nominal one. It's 1 10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was 1. Now also it's 1. But when we actually look into the purchasing power, like 1 rupee, 20 years ago, what you could purchase with 1 rupee, today you cannot purchase it. So the purchasing power has gone down. Purchasing power, so the real value has gone down today. That's gone down. So 1 rupee today, what you could purchase with 1 rupee 20 years ago, now you need 50 rupees to buy the same thing. That's how it's come up. So the purchasing power has gone down. So in real, that's a real value, as we say. Real value is when we talk of the purchasing power. So the real value of money is the amount of goods and services that 1 unit of money can buy. So today it's gone down. That's what it is. And it's the real purchasing power is equal to 1 by P. It's the reciprocal of price level of the commodities. right? Where P stands for the average price level in an economy. So coming up next is the functions. Functions of money. Now, money can be used as a medium of exchange or means of payment, using as a standard of value, unit of account, and standard of deferred payment. Let's go into more details. When we say medium of exchange, so you can use it for making payments, helps you making payments. Like previously what was happening, we had, when money was not there, barter system for exchange of goods for one good with another without the use, you don't use money. But the problem that came up was certain times we want to give up, we have excess production, we want to give it off, but we don't want what we have in return, what the others is giving. Then what happens? We are giving but we cannot get anything in return. That was the main problem. So now what we have is, you have money there, like we give something, we sell, we don't have to get something in return, some other goods we can get money, which can be held for future use. Standard of value, right? That's what I said. Money, it can be held for future. You can use it, keep it now, save it, keep it for future transaction. So the value of that money does not go down. The money value of the money in absolute terms, it does not go down. You can keep it. It's a unit of account, right? Where it's when we say it's a unit account, but money can be used to measure the value of goods, services, and financial assets. What is the value of a particular good or a service or some assets that we want to get it, want to purchase, procure? It's measured in terms of money. That much we have to pay, that much we have to give. That's the total amount of money that we're getting. So that's a value. You can measure the value. Okay, standard of deferred payment, right? So money can be used for valuing future receipts in loan contracts. When loan is given, right? What happens when we take loan from someone? We have to repay back with an interest. So what is the total amount of interest? How do we calculate? It's calculated in terms of money. So we can actually value that, say 10,000 amount, 10,000 unit is given as loan. What will be the total interest on that 10,000? How do we calculate that? That valuation, that's done in terms of money. So you can, for deferred payment is payment which you make later on. So you're getting back that money later on if you loan out interest that you get. Next topic that we have is cash in advance. The cash in advance, it's usually used as one of the methods that is used in the trade, international trade payments. What happens? International trade, sometimes in the domestic trade payment, domestic trade happens, like when we have transaction there also, where a buyer has to make payment before, when once they agree to get for a consignment, that they want a consignment, they would have to make the payment beforehand, even before the production is made, and then get the payment, then get their products, right? So this is something which the sellers would want it. Why? Because there have been instances where the buyers do not make payments. They do not make the payments. Once the payment is done, the default payment happens. So to be on a safer side, right? So it is risky for the buyers because we paid, there's no guarantee that we will get it. That's also there, our products. So it's risky from the buyer's point of view, but it's safer from the seller's point of view, because what they know, if the buyer, if he is paying in advance, that means it's a confirmed order. So that's the thing. And when do we have cash in advance happening? It's when there is a transaction where there is a time gap between the agreement, when you go for an agreement, that sales agreement, and when it's been actually delivered. That gap is there. You do not get it immediately. So that you order and then you get after some days. So that gap. So that's when it's better to go for cash in advance, for especially when the sellers are concerned. Right now, it's basically done, as I just said, to eliminate any sort of credit risk of non-payment. I mean, the non-payment by the buyers to the sellers. So it helps the seller, right? So it is generally benefiting the seller, but posing a risk for the buyer because they may not get their things. So, and it's not very, it's an uncommon trading terms, right? uh, but what happens up here is the risk for any buyer will increase, right? If the seller is not highly credible, like you pay but you do not get it. There are so many instances on the e-commerce, like when we see there are so many online transactions happening and online purchases where the things don't come, or the things that is coming is not the right one which you want, and there's no scope for returning also. That's there. So when you make online payment, when you're paying beforehand, you need to know, you need to be very much clear about where you're paying, whether the seller is credible, like Amazon, Flipkart. These are credible. People trust, and because they give the best things. And if by chance Amazon has that option, like if your things are not, if you're not happy with the product, if it's not what you want, they will refund it. They will just take back that product and your money gets refunded. Okay, so cash in advance, what happens in this case, it requires a buyer to make payments before they actually receive the goods. That's what we said. And it is generally associated with any sales transaction where goods and services are not provided immediately. It takes time. It's not, then it becomes cash on hand, like you immediately cash on delivery, that is you getting it, and payment, spot payment as we say. So, but it's a best option for sellers, right? Why? Because they are assured that the buyer is not a fraud person. But you know what happens, where there are, it's usually, it can be accepted when there is only one seller of that product. But when there are multiple sellers, there's competition. If one seller do not insist on cash in advance, there are others who would not want it. They will say that cash on delivery. The moment you get it, you pay when you get it, when you're getting it. So when there are multiple sellers, competition is high. There it is not generally used. And companies can choose from a variety of payment, right? But they will generally choose the payment terms which will help them to manage their own risk, while at the same time they can be at a better position as compared to their competitors. Okay, we go to the last topic, that is money in utility terms, or MIU. Right. Uh, Now, utility, why is money introduced in the utility function? The reason is because money also is a medium for payment. Utility is when we purchase goods, what when we say what benefit, we purchase only those goods, we prefer only those goods for which has the greatest utility or benefit to us. And how do we purchase it? Money. Money helps us in purchasing those things. That's why money is introduced. Okay, so but when we talk of money and utility, we are not talking of the short term and long term bonds. They like they are not included in this in the utility functions, because they do not have yield any liquidity services. Like when we have to purchase goods and services, short term, long term bonds, you cannot use that to purchase it. So that's why it's excluded from the utility function. It's excluded. Okay. Now, when we talk of utility, we need to talk. We come across how individuals behave. Now, each individuals have their own taste and preferences. It varies where goods and services are concerned, and also with regards, they have their own. They have their own level of income and wealth. So it varies for with regards to the taste, and also with their, they have different levels of income and wealth. So in the microeconomic theory, when you have studied about a rational individual, who is a rational individual? It's a person who is consistent and transitive, right? Consistent with their in their preferences, what they want. And transitive is what is transitive? It's that it's an individual who never reaches the point of satisfaction, maximum satisfaction or satiation for any particular good. It doesn't the satisfaction level is never maximized, like would want to go on purchasing similar things, same things. Okay, so this all the these definitions are clearly mentioned in the three axioms that we have. One is consistent preference, as I said. Say, for instance, if there are two types of goods, and if A and B, if an individual prefers A to B, that means he or she will always choose A over B. So consistent with your preference, you want this. Whereas when we talk of transitive, say there are a bundle of goods there, and A, B, C, a person prefers A over B, and given a choice between B and C, prefers B over C. That means what? He is always preferring A to C, right? So it's not that and whatever maybe A is, he will always go with A. That's the he will never get like attain the satiation point, maximum satisfaction. No, it will go on. Like after you reach the maximum level of satisfaction, then you don't want it. Utility goes down, but it's not never doesn't reach the satiation point. This is the original in the two axioms that we have in the utility function. Now for MIU function, we have real balances as a good. Money is considered as a good, right? It's not directly used for it's used for consumption purpose or production purpose. It's not used, but it is held for exchange of other goods, either in the present or future. Exchange of goods, and when you exchange goods and services, when you want to purchase, you do not directly consume it or use for production, but you're using to purchase things. You're using for production purpose or using to purchase things for consumption purpose, right? So individual is concerned with the exchange value, right? Exchange value. What is the exchange value? What is the exchange value of money with which they are purchasing the commodities, right? So the consistency and transitivity axiom, they actually ensure that individuals' preferences among the goods are ordered monotonically in the same order, preferences, and that's why they're represented by the utility or preference function, right? Axiom 3, that is where we talk of real balance as a good. It ensures that the financial assets, when we are also consider them as a good, it should be used to measure in terms of their purchasing power and not their nominal quantity. What is their purchasing power? Money. That is, we are talking the real value of money. So the inclusion of money and financial assets in the utility function, why it can be justified on the grounds that utility function is expressing your preferences, and since more of the financial assets is demanded than less, so they should be included in the utility function just like other goods. The utility of financial assets does not go on decreasing, it's increasing also, just as the commodities, just as the services that you prefer, the utility goes up. Similarly thing, the utility for the money, financial assets, is also going up. That's why it's included. The money is included in the utility functions. Utility includes commodities, services, as well as money. So now, given these three axioms, like how does initially the utility function that you have studied is, it says u is a function of x1, x2 up to xk. This was not there. Now we have an and mh. So x1 to xk is the quantity of commodities, there are k amount of commodities. N is the labor supplied in hours, amount of labor, and MH is the average amount of real balances that is held by individuals or households for their liquid services, right? So total how many goods? K plus 1 plus 2. So there are K plus 2 goods, where there are K commodities, 1 labor, and the second is where we have real balances. So now, if you look into from all these axioms, right, it tells us that utility as an ordinal function. What is an ordinal function? It's a utility function which gives a consistent and transitive preference ranking of preferences without any other characteristics of measurability. Yes. So these three axioms tell us that talks of utility as a ordinal function or ordinal utility function, right? Where it talks about consistency and their preference ranking, and that's why we have commodities. Also, there's a preference which one you want. Money also, there is a preference you want it, and labor also is needed. Now, if you look into the first order differentiation, you see that commodities and the real balances, they have positive utility. See, all the commodities positive, and also when we talk of the real balances, it's a positive utility, because over span of time, demand for commodities are going, their utility is increasing, and the demand or preference for money is also increasing. We need more and more. But what happens with the labor, the hours work, that has negative utility, goes down. Why? Because as you work more and more, you get stressed out. So at some point, the level of efficiency goes down, right? So this is all that we have in this unit. Okay, so that's all that we have, and we'll see you in the next class.